This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Hope everybody's having a great day. Hope you've enjoyed the week and all the shows we've had so far. If not, feel free to go back and listen. They're there right for you on your podcast player. And if you've missed any episodes this week, go back and listen to them this weekend. It's you got 48 hours to catch up. Please do. It's going to be a good one today, too. Sarah McLellan from the Star-Tribune covers the Wild. She'll be with me here in just a minute to preview the Wild season. They open tonight in Anaheim. Probably won't be able to watch it on TV unless you have Hulu or ESPN Plus. Kind of a weird setup right now, but hopefully you're able to see it, and hopefully you're excited for the year, because I am. I think it's going to be an interesting season for the Wild. I think a lot of new faces, especially on defense. Kind of a make or break year for a few players in the organization, I think, going forward long term, because they're going to need a lot of payroll flexibility, to say the least, next year and beyond, as they consider the full ramifications of the Zach Parise and Ryan Suter buyouts. But getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, Sarah and I will talk about this season and the Wild's prospects. Mark Craig covers the NFL, the Vikings, for the Star-Tribune. We do a weekly picks segment with the NFL. He will be on. Interesting Vikings game this week, I think. Vikings have gone from underdogs to favorites. Sure sounds like Christian McCaffrey might not play for Carolina, and that could mean further struggles for them. Game the Vikings really need to have, but still, just a slight favorite in that game. So we'll get to that one and a bunch of other games as well. But first, what did I miss? I spent just a couple minutes talking about that epic baseball game. Game 5 of the division series, Giants and Dodgers, both teams among the two best teams in the regular season. A rarity in terms of 200-plus win teams facing each other in the postseason. Giants had edged out the Dodgers by one win in the regular season, 107-106 to win the NL West. Came down to a Game 5, came down to the ninth inning, 1-1 going into the ninth. Dodgers get the big hit they so desperately need. Cody Bellinger, who'd been awful basically all season, the 2019 MVP, had just the worst year you could have imagined, but he came through in the clutch a couple times in this series, including a single in the ninth inning to put them ahead 2-1. Giants get a base runner on an error in the ninth inning. Lamont Wade Jr. comes up. I think he's going to end it because he hits a long fly ball to right, but it drifts foul. Former Twin ends up striking out. And then the final out of the game is a check swing that was in no way, shape, or form a swing, but was called one. Strike 3 was called. Terrible ending to a epic game, but let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here. Now that the field is set, now that we know the final 4 teams in baseball, we've got the Dodgers against Atlanta in the National League Championship Series and the Red Sox against the Astros in the ALCS. 3 of those teams are in the top 5 of Major League Baseball in total payroll this year, according to SpotTrack. That's the Dodgers, number 1, dwarfing everybody else by at least $64 million, checking in with a total payroll of $267 million. That's twice the Major League average. That's 2 times more plus some than what the Twins spent. Twins spent $117 million this year. Astros number 4 at $194 million. Red Sox number 5 at $184 million. Atlanta, they still spent a decent amount. They're number 12 at $147 million. Just a reminder that as nice as these stories are about the Rays and other teams who do it without big payrolls, usually at the very end, the teams that win are the teams that spend money, and that is what we have found again this year. Baseball is a good sport with a huge flaw economically, and that's that there's a payroll inequity and that teams cannot compete in a meaningful way. And it's because a lot of these teams have much larger shares of media from their local markets because they're in much larger markets. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but something with baseball has always been rotten in the last 15, 20 years, and this is just another example, even if you can enjoy the epic game that was Thursday night.
The appliance industry is suffering from major delays with shortages on the horizon. The specialists at Warner Stellian have the area's best selection with thousands of appliances in stock for fast pickup or free delivery. Shop 10 Minnesota stores or at warnerstellian.com.
Happy to have Sarah McLellan back on Daily Delivery. Imagine she'll be a more regular guest, although she's been on plenty this offseason as well. But the Wild begins play Friday. Sarah, of course, covers the Wild for the Star Tribune, and so this will be a season preview of sorts. Sarah, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Pretty good, making it through. Excited for a busy time of year. It's getting busy for you in particular, but the convergence of all the sports that happen right now keeps me plenty busy as well. But I'm curious about this team, this Wild team, because I think, like we've talked about maybe before, I don't know if internally they exceeded expectations last year, but they exceeded my expectations last year. And it was such a weird year last year anyway, with the 56 games, the COVID protocols, playing everything within your own division. You go into this season now, though, and I think every projection that I've seen kind of has the Wild safely in that probably going to make the playoffs zone, but I'm still curious to see what this team looks like over 82 games over a different schedule, and curious to kind of hear from you what you think is a realistic expectation for this team going into the year.
I think that's probably one of the biggest question marks, is how does last season's results translate to the new circumstances, or the familiar new old circumstances of the NHL and the division setup, and going back to the Central, playing every team at least once at home and road, and getting back into a division where there's the likes of Winnipeg and Chicago and Nashville. This is not the West Division anymore with 3 rebuilding California teams and an Arizona team also rebuilding. This is very much kind of back to those tough division years that the Wild was familiar with before the shortened season. And so you're right. I think there was a lot of optimism from last season's performance. Strides were made, not only individually, but they translated to the team level. But that's the challenge now, to see if that holds up, to see if that was not in fact a one-off, a byproduct of circumstance, of a quirky season with different division opponents and rivals, but rather a step and maybe a tone being set for, very much what could come in this new era of Wild hockey because of the offseason changes, the exits of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. Is this the beginning? Is this being sustained, or, is this going to be something completely unrelated to last season? I think that's probably where most of the intrigue surrounds this Wild team. And that picture may not be clear in the next few weeks. It may take some time. It may get into the meat of the schedule, into December and January, and some East Coast trips, and playing some of the premier Canadian teams. Just a schedule that the team hasn't had, and that very much could, set the tone for what this season becomes, is how it fares against, what it missed out on last season by playing exclusively in the West Division.
So much of last season and so much of the off season was the eyeballs on it were Kirill Kaprizov related. They waited very long into the off season to get him signed, but did get him signed to that 5-year, $45 million contract. It was a busy off season for Bill Guerin, the general manager, like you said, with the buyouts, with the extension for Joel Eriksson Ek, with the 1-year deal for Kevin Fiala. But the Kaprizov one was really the big one. They get that done. I think a lot of the questions we probably have about what this team looks like a year after last year has to do with, what does Kaprizov look like in an 82-game schedule? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think very much his forecast or outlook this season mirrors the team's kind of situation, and seeing can they do it again, but knowing the challenge is different. Not that he was a secret last season, but he is in the spotlight this season. Teams are aware. He is not going to fly under the radar. And again, not that he did last season, but there is now, a heftier book on him in the NHL, whereas maybe those first few games against an opponent, maybe he caught someone off guard, but they're well aware now. And so can he deal with that? Can he deal with the pressure? Can he deal with the spotlight comes with that, the extra attention, teams maybe playing him harder, checking him more, trying to take away his time and space. That I think will be the big test of what worked last season can translate to this season. And, still too, kind of the unique aspects of playing in different arenas, going to different road cities, playing against Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. Those are the matchups that intrigue fans and, show the excitement level in the league. And, I'm sure that transcends down to the players of going head to head with the best and seeing how they match up. So there's a lot that's going to be new. But clearly, if he can play that same way, find, the areas on the ice to exploit his shot, his passing, his playmaking, his vision, then, that could very well translate and he could continue to build off what was obviously a very strong debut that culminated in the Calder Trophy as the NHL's Rookie of the Year.
He played a lot last year with Matt Zuccarello. That sounds like that will be a partnership that will continue, but it also sounds like Joel Eriksson-Ek, who we mentioned as signed that 8-year contract in the offseason, might be moving over and centering them, at least at the beginning. Line combinations are subject to change game to game, minute to minute, depending on what's working in the NHL. If that is the dynamic, though, at least from the start, how do you think those three players fit together? And especially, kind of breaking up what was a pretty successful line with Eriksson-Ek and Greenway and Foligno, if that's the case too.
Yeah, I can see why it makes a lot of sense from the Wild's perspective to give this line a look. I think maybe at first glance you think, well, does Eriksson-Ek's style really mesh with, kind of the finesse games of, Zuccarello and Kaprizov, and, can they sync together since, last season particularly, you saw the way Kaprizov and Zuccarello manufactured goals, with those offensive instincts and their skill and maybe, making plays on the perimeter and being very heady in what they decided to do. Whereas it was very clear how Joel Eriksson-Ek had success last season. It was, pile driving the middle of the ice and going to the front of the net and getting, redirects and tips and capitalizing on rebounds. But when you look at that and you think of that style meshing with the other style, I think you can see a harmony and a symmetry in that. If those players are on the perimeter and Eriksson-Ek is a handful in the middle, it should and very well could open up more space for them to maneuver. And if Eriksson-Ek is the type of player that defenses will pay attention to in front of their goaltender, and if he can bring that extra body or an extra defenseman or his eyes with him, it should open up lanes. And it did in the preseason. There were some examples in the preseason where he was at the front of the net and there was more than one player marking him and it opened up a lane. So I think from that perspective, you can kind of see that maybe that opposites attract dynamic where they are not the same players. The Wild doesn't, expect him or, need him to change his style of play to play with these two. But in a way they can complement each other because what he does can actually feed into the way the other two play. And, we'll see if that obviously leads to offense, but I can understand the thought process behind it. And when you look at the strides Eriksson-Ek made last season in registering a career high 19 goals and really, showcasing his offensive tool set, I think it makes sense to why not from an organizational perspective, give it a try and see if it works.
Absolutely. And if it doesn't work, they can always scrap it. That's this hockey. They can always scrap it if they need to. A couple more things for you, Sarah McLellan, Wild beat writer for the Star Tribune. So Eriksson-Ek got 8 years. Kaprizov got 5 years. Kevin Fiala got 1 year. Just some quick math. Those are bigger numbers than Fiala's number. And he's an important player for them, obviously offensively gifted, probably the best shot, best pure shooter on the team, perhaps. Although Kaprizov has plenty of talent in that regard as well. When you look at their financial picture going forward and how the Parisi and Suter buyouts are going to start hitting that cap pretty hard next year, you start to realize how important this year might be for Kevin Fiala and his future with the Wild, do you not?
Yeah, I think this will be a good season to really showcase, you're right, probably his niche, probably where he fits with this group. But so far, I think it has been obviously a very successful partnership. And maybe that 1 year contract, doesn't really indicate that or showcase that, but it has. And I think especially last season, with the emergence of Kaprizov, Fiala has an important role on this team. Kaprizov had the 27 goals, the team leader, the spark plug. He's rookie of the year, like I said. But you subtract Fiala, and it's one less line for teams to hone in on. This is not a team, the way it's structured with those two on different lines, that teams can just focus on one and shut down the Wild. Having them on different lines, coming in waves, I think just makes this offense much more dynamic. And you look at Fiala's track record here, 20 goals, a 20-goal scorer, that's a valuable commodity in the NHL in any day and time, in any era. 20-goal scorers don't just come around every day. So it totally does, though, have the prove me type vibe of a year. With the 1-year contract, obviously going back in the summer, they couldn't agree to obviously a long-term parameters. Fiala, they obviously ended up going to filing for salary arbitration. The Wild didn't get that far, which most cases don't. So the 1-year deal is locked in, and he says he's motivated. He says that he's coming in and really looking forward to this season. So, obviously, again, we'll see how the results translate to the ice, but, that top line will get a lot of attention. But right underneath it, that Fiala line, I think, is still very much valuable to the way this offense clicks and how it can have balance and depth and ultimately success.
For as much as the defensive group changed somewhat in the off season, the forwards don't seem like there's a ton of new blood in there. The one name that, is probably first and foremost on the minds of Wild fans that's not in the kind of starting the first 12 is Marco Rossi, sent back to Iowa to start the year. How long do you think he stays there? Is that something where they hope he's a soon arrival, or do they hope that he doesn't have to win a job this soon?
I think they don't know when he will arrive. And I think that's kind of part of the territory. You see how maybe, injuries or trades, rosters change. I think that obviously can institute, a call up, obviously. But I think, there's probably a lot of interest just to see how he fares and getting in games in a normal season. Obviously, he missed all of last season recovering from, the complication with COVID-19, the myocarditis. So I think just there's probably that interest in just him getting into that routine of a season, playing games, and just kind of building that bank of experience in a North American pro setting, which he hasn't done before in his career. So, maybe the results down there will kind of hint at when he could possibly get that call up if an opening happens. But this is very much, it's so cliche, like part of the process, the development, growing homegrown talent, but it's legit because look at Brandon Duhaime. He made this team out of training camp after 2 years in the minors, spending 2 seasons with Iowa after getting drafted and going to college. And so it's not always snap your fingers and you're in the NHL. Not everyone is Connor McDavid or, Kirill Kaprizov coming over at the first opportunity and, on the first line. So it can take time, but I think what he showed at training camp was impressive in the fact that the team felt he got better every game. And if that's the type of progression that a player and a prospect has, then there's probably a lot to like about what that future could look like at the NHL level.
Good stuff, Sarah. Last thought for you. What are some of the things we should watch for in particular if you're able to watch Friday's opener?
Yeah, I think how that first line gels, what the chemistry is like, if they are able to generate, off the rush with Eriksson Ek driving the front of the net. But I think there's also probably a lot of intrigue around the blue line. That's a position we didn't even really touch on, and it has, 3 out of the 6 spaces will be new. So some new pairings, some new combinations. And for so long, that was the bread and butter and the identity of this team. I think it'll be interesting to see if the unit and the blue line can be just as effective as it has been over the years, despite the turnover.
Carson Soucy, a healthy scratch for Seattle the other night. I thought that was interesting. One of the guys that was an off-season departure, and we'll see how Alex Goligoski fares with. He's paired with Spurgeon, right? Is that that's the top defensive pair? So used to Ryan Suter being part of that, and that'll be definitely a thing to watch as well. How do those two play together? Well, you'll read all about it. Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, because Sarah McLellan will be there. Sarah, thanks so much. We'll do this again soon. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Sarah was right. We probably didn't talk quite enough about the defense. I mean, we'll save that for another episode after we've seen them play a few games together. But that remade defense could end up telling the story of the season. And I've got a sneaking suspicion the goaltending could play a factor here too. As great as it was last year, I don't know if you can just pencil in the goaltending to be quite as solid as it was last year when Cam Talbot was excellent and Kaapo Kähkönen filled in admirably when they needed him. So I'll be watching those things, especially as we get a little deeper into this Wild season. Mark Craig joins Daily Delivery right now, as he does on most Friday episodes. NFL picks, time for that. Mark, how you doing? An interesting week, I think.
I'm doing well. This is my last chance to over brag about the lock of the week last week being the Vikings over the Lions. Never a doubt.
Shouldn't have been in doubt.
Wow, what a game.
We can talk about that game a little bit if you want, but it was, I mean, when they're up 16-6 and the Lions have gone for it from their own territory in desperation and got sacked with like 4 minutes left, you kind of think that one's over, don't you?
Yeah, you do think it's over. It's just one of those, I mean, I never anticipated, but when you're just kind of kicking field goals, although Dan Campbell also, him going for fourth down earlier in the game when and he punts the ball and it goes into the end zone. It's only like a net 20 yards or whatever. I thought that was a pretty conservative on his part considering, but I did like his going for two at the end. That was impressive.
And then the Vikings, of course, pull it out. 54-yard field goal by Greg Joseph at the gun to rescue their season, more or less, and make Sunday's game at Carolina have a pretty good amount of meaning. And this is an interesting matchup. Carolina's been a little bit all over the map this year. Started out really well, but then Christian McCaffrey was injured. Sam Darnold, who had looked like he was onto something early on, has thrown some interceptions lately, but that's been without McCaffrey. Vikings opened as underdogs in this game, but are now 1-point road favorites despite having a lesser record than Carolina. Carolina being 3-2, Vikings are 2-3. Feels like everything that we know is about the Vikings and just looking at this game tells us this should be a close one. How do we kind of anticipate what might happen and who might come out on top in a game like that?
Yeah, I mean, I picked the Vikings, 23-21. I think it's going to be not crazy high scoring and not real low scoring, but I think people, that are the people who know all about this stuff, the true people who know is the odds makers, and I think that they look at this is a Vikings defense that sure isn't perfect. But if you look at a year ago, they had 23 sacks the entire year. I mean, that was the franchise low. And now I think they have 17 sacks already. I mean, this is and Everson Griffin's playing like an all-pro 28-year-old Everson Griffin. Daniil Hunter is fantastic. They got Barr back. And also you look at, I mean, I know that they should never have been in this situation, but this is exactly what you pay a Kirk Cousins to do. I mean, it's kind of funny that, people are so upset, and granted, they should have handled the Lions and everything, but the kicker makes a field goal to win it in Minnesota, and the quarterback performed like Aaron Rodgers to get him into that position, and there's still this feeling of like the end is here. But so I have a feeling that there's a little more respect for what the Vikings are capable of, and also probably a little bit of distrust in what Sam Darnold can do without a healthy Christian McCaffrey.
Now, McCaffrey what's his status at this point? I can't remember. Is he in or out?
Well, he's similar to although I think Dalvin Cook will play, but he's similar to Cook in that it's a hamstring, so that every day is an important day, to move forward with that. I think his status is up in the air, which could be which is probably a big reason why the line is fluctuating between, I picked it as upsets, early upset special. And by the time I think it got in print, they were favored. So it's kind of this juggling match of, who's the better team. And I think a lot of that has to do with, we don't really know the two top running backs, probably the two best players on each team. We don't know if they're going to play or not.
Now, before we move on to a couple other games, I want to ask you about the Vikings defense. You referenced it. They've given up less than 20 points in each of their last 3 games, and Football Outsiders, which kind of takes into account a lot of different things, not just points, yards. It takes into account situational play and things like that. Has the Vikings number 8 in defense right now in their DVOA rankings. Are you buying that they're a top 10 defense right now?
Probably not top 10, but upper half of the league. You look at last year, just how embarrassing that defense was at the end, and just how just completely, there was nothing there. They were not an NFL defense. And then for them to play, fairly well against run defense. Granted, early on, there were some runs, 12, 13, 11 yards where you're like, they just can't get it together. But Michael Pierce is out. But I do see that, I see that Peterson, he gets beat on a third down play, but he's also in pretty good tight coverage. So I would be happy with how he's playing. Breland is getting better, although, that's probably not saying much considering where he started. It's still a work in progress, but I think they are I don't know if they're a top 8 defense, but they're a defense that you can win with if the offensive line can control that side of the ball and they can get Dalvin Cook healthy. Dalvin Cook's health will mean a whole heck of a lot to these next 6 games if they can keep him healthy. And, that just puts them so much ahead of where they are when they have to play without him.
Opportunity for the Vikings to gain ground on somebody in the division this week, because the next game I want to talk about is Green Bay, Chicago, interdivision matchup. Talk about escapes. Green Bay got away with one last week against Cincinnati. Mason Crosby misses 3 potential game-winning field goals. Cincinnati's kicker misses 2, including one that he thought was obviously good because he started celebrating a little bit too early. Then Mason Crosby finally makes one, and the Packers get out of there with an overtime win, and they're 4-1. Chicago 3-2. You nailed that upset special last week with them beating the Raiders right before everything blew up on the Raiders and John Gruden resigned. What this is an interesting game. I think Green Bay is favored by 4 or 5 points. Green Bay doesn't look great yet, but they are 4-1. Chicago 3-2. What in terms of style and matchup, how do you see this one playing out?
First of all, I think the Bengals are a better team than I know that with Burrow and Chase and everything, they're a flashy team, but I think they're also a pretty good team. So for the Packers to win that game is pretty impressive on the road. The Vikings couldn't do it there. And that Bengals kicker, he's probably celebrating out of habit because the first 4 games of his NFL career, I think they carried him off the field twice with game winners. So I guess he's going to miss once in a while. But yeah, I like this game just because it's the first time Justin Fields is involved. And I think he's going to be really good. I don't think he's good enough right now or experienced enough right now to beat Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is like 20-5 against the Bears at 55 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. It's like a 107 passer rating or something like that. I like the fact that this is starting a new era for the Bears against the Packers, and I like to watch those Bears-Packers games. Be real interesting to see what Fields can do. More so about what Nagy, like Nagy, that first game against the Browns. I don't know if he just didn't have enough time to think but he just basically called a game as if Andy Dalton was there. And I think you saw a little bit different Fields the next 2 games or 1 or 2 games. So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch that. I think the Packers win the game, and I don't know if I had them covering or not, but 24-17. I like the Packers to win, even though it's in Chicago.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Fields is probably going to have a little bit of growing pains. The Vikings, unfortunately, probably see him more seasoned at the end of the year because I think both of those Bears games are, 2 of the last 3 of the year against the Bears, right? Or something like that?
I think it's late. It's very strange.
So that's interesting. Let's move on to a couple more here. You like you call it I don't know if you officially do a lock of the week, but you like Rams over Giants. You'd say not much chance for the Giants to win that one.
Yes, I do a lock of the week for Vikings, unless I lose it, and then I kind of let it just drift away, Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Daniel Jones is going to play, but I really don't care. It's a 10.5 points. Barkley's out again. They're obviously they're not very good with him. They're definitely not good without him. So, and the quarterback doesn't do a whole lot for me. I mean, he plays hard and everything, but if he's not in it. But in the Rams, I think they'll travel well. I mean, the road teams this year, it seems like a big home field advantage. I thought would be a bigger advantage coming off the pandemic. Of course, it's a smaller sample size, but I think it's only like 51% home teams are winning, true home teams. I didn't count the London game and
sure.
Packers going to Jacksonville for a New Orleans home game. But yeah, I just like the Rams going across the country and doing what they have to do and getting out of there with a 2-touchdown win, and that'll be it.
Probably the best game of the week, Cardinals at Browns. Chargers managed to solve a Browns defense that Vikings only got 7. Chargers got 40 more than that, 47 last week. So don't quite know what to make of that. But probably the best game of the week. Cardinals, the last unbeaten team in the NFL. The Browns look like a contender in the AFC, especially with Kansas City seeming to experience a little bit of slippage here, although I think Buffalo is probably the best over there in that conference right now until proven otherwise. What do you like about this game?
Are we counting those the points that the Chargers had where the Browns defense picked up the running back and carried him into the end zone, the ball back? That's one of the stranger things I've seen. Usually, like defense will lay down and let him score. Well, he didn't want to score, so they basically tackled him and brought him into the end zone. But yeah, I like the Browns because they didn't win this game, but they can win a low scoring game with Baker Mayfield playing terribly, or they can go out there and have a shootout with just on the road with Justin Herbert and that machine of an offense when Baker's playing well. So I like where the Browns are, and also I picked the Browns to win this game because of where it's at. It's in Cleveland, and it just feels like it's time for the Cardinals to. It's one of those NFL kind of readjust the perception games that may not have a whole lot of reason behind it, but
sure.
I do think the Browns is a good team at home, and it's just time for the Cardinals to lose.
Let's check the upset special. I actually disagree with you on this one. You've got Cowboys -4 at Patriots. You like New England at home. I don't think New England's very good. I think Dallas wins this game, but give me your reasoning for picking the Patriots by 3.
It's a similar one, of the feeling of, there's the Cowboys are rolling. They've won 4 in a row. You're just kind of hearing that Cowboy feel again. And in New England, and a big part of it was, and I know it was raining and everything, but how New England played against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. I know that the Cowboys got a ton of weapons. I just saw my feeling, it could be completely wrong, is Belichick finds one thing to take away from Mike McCarthy to kind of throw a wrench in their system. I like how Mac Jones is playing. I know they had to come back to beat. They were down big against the Texans, but they came back and won. I like how Mac Jones played game against Brady. If the kicker doesn't miss the field goal, it doesn't hit the upright, you're talking about this kid, with Tom Brady on the other side. Of course, Tom Brady would have had 55 seconds left. So you would have been talking about at least the 2 quarterbacks going back and forth on game-winning drives. But I like this as, and I've been fooled by this since Brady left. I've had a couple of those where I'm still picking the Patriots thinking they're probably better than they are. But when you got to pick an upset special, I wanted to go swung for the fence on this one.
Well, you've been pretty good on the upset specials. You're 4-1 so far on the upset specials. So maybe we should be listening to you and not me.
I felt better about the Bears one. I thought that one, I felt confident on that one. This one, I feel like I'm maybe throwing something at the wall that'll stick. But I did like the Bears one for sure. and I didn't even know what was coming down the pike for them.
For sure. Well, we'll see how we'll see how it all unfolds. The rest of us, Thursday night game was fun, and then we'll have the rest of the slate on Sunday and Monday, and we'll do this again next week. No Vikings game a week from now, so we'll have to cook up something else. Thanks, Mark Craig. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Good stuff for Mark Craig. As usual, be watching intently that Sunday Vikings-Carolina game. Interesting quote from Mike Zimmer on KFan earlier this week about that post-game celebration, I guess you could still call it, with Kirk Cousins. Quote, "I'm one of those guys that when I get pushed, I push back. To be continued in Carolina." We'll be interested to see how that game goes, how that relationship between the coach and the quarterback really looks. That'll do it for today. Thanks so much for joining me all week. Good stuff coming up next week. Probably a Timberwolves preview, almost definitely one with Chris Hine. They open their season on Wednesday. It's the convergence of all these seasons. Enjoy it all, and we'll see you again on Monday.